What's up, guys? I'm Nobody Special. And for the last couple weeks, I've been documenting the China Evergrande story and what I believe is the imminent collapse of the Chinese housing market. Now, most of that coverage has been focused on the effect on housing and real estate and the financial system over in China. But there's some indirect effects that I want to start talking about. In particular, the collapse of the Chinese housing market could lead to a shortage in silver, my favorite of the shiny metals. You ready? Hit it. Thank you for joining me. I'm Jack Gamble, and I'm Nobody Special. And if you're still following this channel after the last few weeks, it means you're not sick of hearing about the China Evergrande story, but today I want to put a slightly different spin on it, and that is how the collapse of China Evergrande could indirectly lead to a shortage of silver. All right, silver, my favorite of the shiny metals. Now, two things before we get into that. Number one, please remember to smash that big, beautiful like button, subscribe to my channel, and hit that notification bell. It really helps me out. And number two, I want to send a shout out to all the silverbacks at the Wall Street Silver Group. It's been a while since I've been over there in that group. But if you don't know, this channel was effectively born in the Wall Street Silver Group. I started doing some videos on Reddit back in February, March timeframe. And really, that's why I started this channel, is because of the reception over there. So thanks again to all you guys over in the Wall Street Silver Group for making this channel possible. Now, one more thing I want to mention is this video is going to focus solely on silver supply, okay? Now, remember, supply is only half the market. Demand is the other half. And I'm not going to get into the potential effects of the Chinese housing collapse on the demand for silver. I will real quickly touch on it that a collapse in Chinese housing could reduce Chinese industrial output, which could reduce silver demand. That's a topic for another day. So right now, we're going to focus only on silver supply. Now, why is it? How am I saying that a collapse of the housing market in China could negatively impact silver supply? Well, there's a couple of things. First off, you have to keep in mind how silver is mined. Now, if you look at this chart, this is showing where the silver comes from, at least where the silver that is mined comes from, okay? And you can see here, silver is predominantly an incidental metal. It means most of the silver that we dig up out of the ground doesn't come from dedicated silver mines where we're looking for silver. That actually only makes up about 26% of silver mine supply. You can see in this chart the lion's share of silver is found while digging for other metals. Now, a little bit there, 23.5% is gold, but you'll notice by far copper and lead and zinc make up the lion's share of where our silver mine comes from. Keep that in mind, and this is the key to why the slowdown in the Chinese housing market could result in a shortage of silver, because copper, lead, and zinc account for 61% of the silver that comes out of the ground. So most of the silver supply is dependent on copper mines, lead, and zinc mines. Keep that in mind, copper, lead, and zinc, and in particular zinc, okay, because most of the lead-zinc category is really zinc mines. So in this video, we want to look at how a slowdown in China's housing market, or the total collapse of China's housing market, is going to affect the copper and the zinc markets. Now, before we get into those specific metals, take a look at this chart of total global silver supply. Now, you'll notice the big spike in silver supply started at the end of the 1990s, and that coincides with the massive, ridiculous boom in Chinese construction, which has led to this problem at Evergrande. Okay, so ever since China has started this crazy building spree, it's really resulted in a big expansion of the silver supply. And again, that didn't mean we went looking for more silver, but what we have needed to satisfy China's insatiable appetite is a lot more steel and a lot more copper, because those metals are used a lot in building. Now, why do I say steel? Because a minute ago I said zinc. Well, let's take a look at zinc. Now, this chart is showing what we use zinc for, and you'll notice 50% is used for galvanizing. Now, galvanizing is a corrosion-resistant treatment that we apply to structural steel, i.e., the main use of zinc is in steel for construction. Now, you've also got zinc-based alloys, brass and bronzes on there. Those are also industrial metals and metals that are used in construction. So really, the use for zinc is in steel production. Okay, so let's look at steel production. Here's a chart of global steel consumption. And you can see big in red right there, 46.4% of all global steel consumption is going into China. Now, all of that is not going into building. Remember, China is the world's factory. So we want to break down that 46% a little bit further. And that brings us to this chart. Almost half of the steel in China is used for construction. Now, you also see things like equipment manufacturing, shipbuilding, automotives, light industry. A lot of that stuff is going to take a hit from a Chinese housing collapse also. But clearly, the main use of steel in China is in construction. And use of steel for construction in China is about to grind to a halt. It's not going to be slowed down. I mean, it is going to grind to a halt because these property developers you're seeing, they're barely clinging to life. They're just trying to make interest payments, let alone finish construction on some of these big projects. So steel in China, the consumption of it is about to fall off a cliff. And when steel consumption falls off a cliff, that means the demand for zinc is going to fall off a cliff too. And again, I want to point to this chart. An awful lot of our silver supply comes from zinc mines. Do you see where we're going with this? Do you see how the collapse in construction in China could affect the silver output? And if you're still not convinced, let's look at copper, because remember, copper mines was another main source of silver. And since we just love charts today, here's another one for you to look at. This is copper demand by country. And again, look here how China's copper usage has just exploded since the early 2000s, accounting for more than half of copper consumption globally. Now, copper is used mainly for wiring and plumbing. Those are the two main uses of copper. And you can see here, demand in China, about more than half of global demand. So a slowdown in Chinese construction is majorly going to impact the global demand for copper. So breaking that down a little further, here's how copper demand is broken up by source industry. Now you can say it's only about 30% of copper goes directly into building construction, think plumbing. However, you will notice electrical and electronic products is another 38.7%. And you're not going to need much electrical wiring if you're not building any new buildings. And it's a good bet as if building slows down, then the build out of the Chinese power grid is also going to be affected. So again, this collapse of the Chinese housing market, you're going to see copper demand fall off a cliff. Copper demand falls off a cliff. That means copper mines become less profitable. That means they produce less copper and they accidentally find less silver. So I think we've pretty clearly demonstrated here how China right now represents by far the hungriest demand for copper and for zinc through the steel industry, and how the collapse of the Chinese housing market could result in demand for those metals falling off a cliff. And that would make those mines, which are incidentally producing silver, much less profitable and could result in a big reduction in mine output and thus a big reduction in silver supply. But there's another factor you have to keep in mind, and that is energy prices. Over the last couple of weeks, energy prices have spiked like we haven't seen in decades. Now, you need to factor in one of the highest input costs in the metals industry is energy. It takes a lot of energy to both mine and to refine these products. So as we see the demand for these metals drop, we're also seeing the cost to mine them and the cost to refine them go way up, which means the metal space is really in for a world of hurt in the next couple of months. So what does this mean in short? This means we are going to start to see one by one less profitable lead zinc mines and less profitable copper mines are going to start shutting down as their cost to produce go up and demand for their product goes down. That is definitely going to have an impact on the supply of silver. Now again, I want to point you to this chart of global silver supply. And keep in mind that most of this big increase in the silver supply that we've seen since the early 2000s has been driven by the incidental discovery of silver while mining for copper and zinc in order to satisfy the insatiable appetite that the Chinese had for construction. So we could be looking at a return to somewhere near the supply of silver that we had in the 1990s. And if you look at this chart, that is a big drop from today's silver supply. Now again, this video has focused only on supply. We haven't really talked about demand. That is a whole different dynamic, right? With demand, you've got the inflation situation driving monetary demand, but at the same time, you have slowdowns in industrial output could affect demand, and you have the green revolution, and who knows what this energy crisis is going to do to the demand for solar panels and everything. So there's a big change to demand that's also coming. However, for the sake of this video, the one thing you should take away from this is that the collapse of the Chinese housing market is absolutely going to cause a major reduction in global silver supply. Now, I don't expect this phenomenon to play out like overnight, all right? We're not talking about this major falling off a cliff. What we are seeing is this is probably going to play out more over years versus months. You're going to see a big drop initially, and then I think we're going to see reductions over time. So again, I have to say, I'm not a financial advisor. This isn't financial advice. Do your own research, your own DD, arrive at a decision that's right for you based on your unique situation. That said, what I like to do is I like to dollar cost average into physical silver. I don't like ETFs. I don't like unallocated storage Ponzi schemes. I like the physical metal. If you hold it, you own it. That is just my opinion. Again, I'm not a financial advisor. So long story short, guys, if we are really looking at the collapse of the Chinese housing market, which I believe is imminent, and I've got a whole playlist of China Evergrande videos that I'll put a link to in the description below that supports my theory that the Chinese housing market is about to collapse. And because of the fact that most of the silver is incidentally discovered while looking for copper and zinc, I think we are looking at a major drawdown in global silver supply coming over the following years. Guys, as always, I want to thank you for your time, for watching this video. Please remember to hit that big, beautiful like button, subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell. I'd be forever in your debt. And while you're at it, head over to the Wall Street Silver Group and Reddit and join that group. They've got almost 160,000 members in that group now. It is one of the fastest growing groups on Reddit, and I highly recommend it. It's a great bunch of guys over there. In the meantime, folks, live small and dream big.